Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take this time real quick to just thank everyone for joining us for the 2025 State of Research. I want to thank everyone for joining us here in person, and I want to thank the so far 150 viewers who are on Zoom. Before we get started, I do want to take time to acknowledge that founded in 1889, the University of New Mexico sits on the traditional homelands of the Pueblo of Sandia. The original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache, since time immemorial, have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. We gratefully recognize our history. I do also want to take time to say thank you to our New Mexico congressional delegation who's joined us, and also our state and local leaders for their ongoing collaboration as we strategically navigate our current research landscape. I also want to say thank you to our university leadership, and including President Stokes and our regents. Lastly, our deepest gratitude to all the researchers, to you who are here, to staff, faculty, students who are here today and online and across the university. We would not be here without you. And as a little appreciation of and recognition, we've created a video that we'd love to share with you at this time.
Here at the University of New Mexico, we believe that research is education.
An opportunity to be creative.
It triggers the imagination.
It's collaborative. It's the co-creation of knowledge.
There's a lot of trial and error in a way that contributes to the store of knowledge for mankind.
Research and supporting research is not just a job.
It's not just what we do as students, but it's also how we educate ourselves as human beings about the world around us.
Research starts with a question.
When a person is curious and stubborn enough to challenge the knowledge that they have and start asking questions to explore unknown areas.
Really a form of learning in which the learner is discovering, developing, and validating their own evidence.
As a premier R1 institution in the states of New Mexico, we're uniquely positioned to offer an unparalleled educational experience for our students.
What are we doing here? Why are we here? How have we gotten this far? And is there a better way to do this? Is the point of our research. It's to build upon the foundation that we've been given and build an even better foundation for future researchers to come in and develop an even better pathway.
It's been able to equip me with, of course, certain tools and skills as a student, but also thinking how you can be of service to the community.
It touches my heart because I know that a lot of the research that is happening at UNM supports diverse communities, minorities, and it helps us all make informed decisions about our lives.
I feel a sense of obligation and responsibility to my Diné people, to my Navajo Nation, and so I draw on oral history, I draw on Diné traditional.
Addressing these challenges, we're not only advancing scientific knowledge, but also educating younger generation and improving the quality of life in our community.
And as a result, we elevate mankind and society through our research. Whether it be a math problem, whether it be dancing, art, or music, it speaks to the soul and it speaks to the imagination and making those things that we once thought was impossible, possible.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to hand the floor over to VPR Ellen Fisher and VPR Hangame Racy, and get us going on our brief presentation.
Thanks, friend. I've seen that video like 6 or 7 times now, and I didn't mean to stand up here and do this, but I'm very honored to be at UNM and have the job I have. And I see the passion and the dedication and really just the amazingness of our researchers every day. And what we were hoping to do with that video was to create something that really reflected what we see in my office, I think in Hangamay's office as well, on a daily basis. So, I'm sorry. I might watch it 25 more times and hopefully I'll stop crying when I watch it. But with that, I also wanted to just make a note that this is the 4th state of research that we have done here at UNM, and we're changing up the format a little bit this year. Normally we have a much longer formal presentation, and this year we're going to try to cut that formal part down a bit. In fact, I think we have succeeded. We're also going to do it as a joint presentation between me and Dr. Racy. I'm going to start and then hand it over to her in a minute. And then what we're going to have is a panel. And I know most of you are probably here to hear about what we have to say in the town hall portion of this. But we are going to focus a little bit on some of the highlights from the past year. And so I'm going to start. Traditionally, we do start with the numbers. We do measures of research excellence. These are our research metrics that we do track, and we know they're just numbers, and they're not the only measure of our impact as a research community. I want to point out a couple of these numbers up in the upper right-hand or left-hand corner. 389 million in research expenditures in FY24. That's a record for the University of New Mexico, and I think that we're all very proud of that number. And then in the lower right-hand corner over here, you'll also see we supported around 1,100 student researchers with those funds, which is also really exciting to see that number as well. And then I also want to point out in the lower left-hand corner is a number we might come back to later in the town hall part of the presentation, but in FY24, we received over 1,900 awards for contracts and grants to support our research endeavors. We currently have, I think, over 2,000 active awards right now. And so just keep that in the back of your mind in terms of numbers when we start to talk numbers on maybe some of the Q&A. The other thing that we historically do is talk about the Grand Challenges program. I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that this is a presidential initiative. The other is that it actually is truly across all of our campuses. And I also think that this is a really strong piece of evidence of how doing some investment in our research community can have huge dividends. And the most obvious one, of course, is that since 2019, as a university, we have invested around $2.3 million, and that has resulted in over $100 million in research funding that has come in that can be tied directly to the Grand Challenges program. Again, those are just numbers, and money is just one measure of impact. I think the more important impact here is if you look at the numbers of faculty, staff, and students that have been engaged in the Grand Challenges program over the last 6 years. That's pretty phenomenal to see those numbers up there. And also, I want to just point out lastly that this is also a huge opportunity for this university to grow our community engagement. We have over 128 community partners that have participated in the Grand Challenges program over 6 years as well. The thing that we'd like to talk a little bit about this year and that we're doing that's new for the Grand Challenges program is that we've introduced a pilot, what we're calling a vertically integrated fellowship program. And the step one, which is the graduate level, is going on right now, that we have identified 3 graduate students that are working with each of the 3 level 2 teams: child health, just transition to green energy, and sustainable space. Those 3 students are not only working on the research projects, but are also getting co-curricular, if you will, training on how to be a good mentor. And also they're working then across the 3 teams. So they're working with each other as well. And step 2 of this is going to be this summer, where we're going to bring in 3 additional undergraduate researchers that will then be mentored by those graduate students and again work on the research projects of these teams. And we're hoping to expand this program in the future. I'm also going to say we're really appreciative that President Stokes bought onto this idea and is supporting these students with those fellowships. And again, like I said, we're hoping to expand it to more students as well. I'm now going to turn to our talk a little bit about two of our Category 3 centers, our most recently added to. The first is the QNMI, the Quantum New Mexico Institute, and just to mention a couple of new developments, I would say, for QNMI. First is that we are part of a regional EDA tech hub that is being led by Elevate Quantum, which is a quantum company that's based in Denver. And so this is a regional tech hub that's between Colorado and New Mexico. Around 40 million of that 120 million was actually provided by the EDA grant, and the remainder is coming from the states of Colorado and New Mexico. We were able to get support for this project through the Technology Enhancement Fund, so we wanted to just make sure we noted that. Also equally exciting as a new development is that Quantinuum, which is a quantum computing industry, has announced at the beginning of this year, they announced that they will be coming to New Mexico and building a site here in New Mexico. And part of that, at least, is because we know that the state of New Mexico has become very favorably inclined towards quantum, and there have been multiple bills that were introduced in the 2025 New Mexico legislative session, and I don't know exactly what the fate of all those bills is going to be in the final analysis, but I have to say it's been really exciting to hear the words quantum and quantum science and quantum industry being bandied about in Santa Fe over the last 2 months, so that's been really exciting. And then last, we have a new director search underway. We hope to be bringing somebody on board later this year. The other new institute that we have is ARID, Accelerating Resilience Innovations in Drylands. And they launched about a year and a half ago. And over the last year and a half, they've received 7 new awards totaling about $28 million in new funding, and some of those projects are listed up here. I also wanted to note that in November, they held a managers workshop where they brought in people from all over the state, from all different sectors, and they were trying to build partnerships. And I think that that's one of the real advantages for having a platform like ARID, is that, again, we can raise visibility and start to use it as a way to build our collaborations and so forth. And one of the greatest things to come out of that, in my opinion, is that they've actually started to build a database of people external to the university who are interested in mentoring our students. So I think that's, again, going to be a very exciting project for them to continue to build on after that. And again, we're searching for a new area director, and we'll have candidates here on campus in the next couple of months. The next couple of slides, I'm going to focus on just three specific projects, three specific individuals. Again, we usually have an hour for this, and we're going to try to scrunch it into a much smaller time frame to get to the Q&A. But I just wanted to highlight a few of these. First is Nick Ferenchuk, who's an associate professor of civil construction and environmental engineering. And in 2023, he got a $15 million grant from the Department of Transportation to build the Center for Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety. And out of that has come some amazing stuff that over the last year and a half or so. Some of that is including patented technology to track loud vehicles and other elements of bicycle and pedestrian safety. And as any of you who have a car and drive around New Mexico, you know that that's probably a really important thing for the state of New Mexico, right? And then on the right-hand side, I'm highlighting Marjorie Krebs, who is a professor of elementary education in our College of Education and Human Sciences. And I just wanted to call out the teacher residency program that it started back in 2019, and I think kind of had a little bit of fits and starts during the COVID season. But a couple of points I wanted to note here are that they have seen an over 400% increase in enrollment in their graduate special education program, which is just phenomenal, and that they have trained 300 teacher residents to serve in 9 different New Mexico licensure areas. So again, really demonstrating UNM's commitment to the children of New Mexico and serving the entire state of New Mexico. The last individual that I wanted to highlight was Sabankar Banerjee. He's just had an absolutely amazing year. I'm not going to go through all of the highlights here, but I want to point out that he has had 31 photographs placed at various art museums across the nation. And the one that you see in the background there is actually one of his, which is it's just really very, very cool. And also that he, along with some other faculty and students from UNM, had an exhibit in the Venice Biennial Art Exhibition, and actually received the top university and research project for a project called A Library, a Classroom, and the World. And that exhibit was seen by over 500,000 people, which again, I think really elevates that UNM's commitment to art and culture, that we are being, that kind of exposure around the world is just amazing. So, okay, with that, I'm going to move over to the substance use disorders, which is also a place where we really can see the evidence of a one university approach to a particular strategic initiative. And again, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I want to point out that these are statistics that you hear all the time. New Mexico ranks #1 in the nation for alcohol mortality and #8 in drug overdose deaths. Those are not numbers where we want to be #1 or #8 even. We'd like to be more like 48 or 49 or 50. I believe that UNM is actually uniquely poised to be incredibly responsive to this crisis within our state, and to be able to really make a big effort and a big impact here. I've got a lot of things listed up there that we do. A lot of this, I want to say again, is very much a one university approach. We have a brand new building on North Campus, the Interdisciplinary Substance Use and Brain Injury Facility, which is really already starting to make an impact on what we can do with both research and treatment. And then I also want to, the last bullet here is that recently President Stokes announced that she's going to initiate a search for a new director of the UNM Office of Substance Use Disorders. We don't have that office right now. It's one that's going to be created. And I think that's, again, a testament to the fact that this is really a university-wide initiative that we want to continue to be able to make a difference, and again, to raise the visibility of what we do in this particular area. And I also want to say that this is another place where we have gotten a lot of traction with our legislature, and again, don't know what's going to happen in the final analysis, but it looks like we may be getting some state funding to help support that office as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Racy to talk about some things that are going on North Campus.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me, Ellen. So like just a few more slides, and then we can have a discussion about whatever you may have in your mind. So I would like to tell you about ADRC, which stands for Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. We got funded actually last year, and that is the first time that we have received this award. And we are now the 35th ADRC in United States. So we are very proud of these efforts that was started sometimes in 2016 to 2017. Right after that, we had a couple of R01s followed by an exploratory ADRC, and then last year that we were funded to be a center. As part of these centers, there are the whole spectrum of research and is done in the center from basic science all the way to community engagement and outreach. Yes. So I think pretty much everybody should have heard about our research on microplastic research. I'm sure you have seen the SNL 50 and how Robert De Niro's section also mentioned the microplastic. So that is actually a testament to all the work that we have done. We have done with talking about this research and sharing the result of what has been found with this kind of a research. And as you can see on the side, there are multiple grants that are focusing on microplastic and how they are accumulating in different organs of the body. Again, as you see, we have U grants, R01 grants, multiple R01 grants, P50s and P20. And we are hoping we can actually build on these efforts and hopefully bring in more funding in this area. So CADIS is one of the centers that was established last year, and that stands for Center for Advancing Dissemination and Implementation. we really felt like we need to provide training and consultation in this area of research. Again, a lot of P grants and U grants are focusing on this dissemination and implementation, and it is again becoming a focus of research. So the research that is done gets translated in the practice. So as part of this center, this is more like a resource that is available to all the faculty. We provide proposal consultation, education, mentorship, and of course we provide hands-on assistance with regard to grant submission. And last but not least, I would like to mention our CTSC, Clinical Translational Science Center, in which the grant was submitted last year. This is a very complex grant, and it is in collaboration with University of Arizona. We received an outstanding score, and the council was supposed to meet by now, and the funds were supposed to be released by June 1. But of course, that has not happened yet. However, we remain optimistic, and we hope to receive these fundings. Again, it's a great collaboration with University of Arizona with many modules and elements that are going to be available as a resource to all faculty at UNM. And with that.
Okay, so we are going to transition to the town hall roundtable, whatever we want to call this next part, where we're going to pull up our other panelists here in just a minute. I wanted to do a little bit of a framing for people. After the start of the year with the new administration that came into Washington, UNM did establish 5 rapid response teams. They're all listed up here. Obviously, we're going to focus on the research and federal funding, one of those, and not the other ones. We do have the provost here, so you'll hear a little bit about that in a minute. But I also wanted to just point out that our rapid response team, we have about 20 people that are meeting 2 to 3 times a week and have been almost since January 20th. I think we started a little after that. The composition of that team, we have representation from the contract and grant accounting offices on both North Campus and Central Campus. We also have representation from our sponsored projects offices. We have legal counsel. We have faculty representation on that team. We also have our government relations people, and then also representation from our research offices as well. So it's a really good team. It's been great to be working with them, although the circumstances in which we've come together have not been so great. But I wanted to also do a little bit of framing of what our work has been focused on. So I just wanted to note that as of March 9th, so that's a few days ago, there may be more out there, but as of March 9th, the new administration has issued 90 executive orders. And I went through them a couple days ago, and I just started counting, and when I hit 30, that I felt directly, I sort of stopped, but I want to say that these are the ones that I felt directly impacted federally funded research and development. We may be impacted in the research enterprise through some of the other ones, but these were ones that we felt were directly impacting research and development in the U.S. Now, in response to that, we'll also say that there's been quite a bit of legal activity, if you haven't been keeping up. And as of March 11th, which is yesterday, there have been 114 legal challenges to those executive orders. And then the responses to those legal challenges, there have been many temporary restraining orders that have been issued. There have also been some preliminary injunctions, and some of those actions have also entered into the appeal process now. So just kind of wanted to put that a little bit in context and say that I've had a lot of meetings with lawyers over the last 2 months that never thought I needed to have, or maybe didn't want to have also. I love our lawyers. Where's Ari? She's here. So yeah, we love Ari. But with that though, I also wanted to, and I know this slide is super busy and has a lot of words on it, but I really wanted to emphasize that we have been working our butts off for the last couple of months. We've been, and the number one thing we've been doing is communicating. We have communications, the top 2 bullets up there. We have a lot of communication going on. And the one piece I want to emphasize there is that we have, Hangme and I have had multiple congressional briefings over the last few weeks. And we've been working with our state and local representatives as well. We also, thanks to our EVPs, we have put in place some short-term bridge funding for our most vulnerable researchers, primarily our students at this point. Currently, we have on the order of 36 or so students that are being supported by that mechanism. We've also been responding, we've been reviewing our grant portfolio for at-risk awards and assessing the potential for pivoting. Not all of those executive orders go in the negative direction from a research perspective. There's some indication there may be new areas that we may be able to go into. And we've also been looking at potential opportunities for new or different kinds of funding. I think it goes without saying, we've been monitoring all the activity from all of the funding agencies. It's a lot of activity, and I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's been on that team. Many of them are here in the audience, and we really appreciate all of their support and all of the effort that they've been putting towards being responsive to the changing funding landscape. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Emery Thompson, who's AVP in my office and a professor in anthropology. And she is going to be the primary cat herder for the next section as we move into the panel discussion. So with that, I'm going to read it over. Okay.
Everybody a minute to get situated. So I want to start by introducing the lovely people to my right who are in the firing line today. And starting closest to me is EVP James Holloway. Provost Holloway joined the University of New Mexico as Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs in July 2019. He's also a professor in the Department of Nuclear Engineering. His career has included a mix of research, teaching, administration, and global projects, including in India, Ethiopia, and Ghana. Now, we collected some fun facts. You get to decide how fun these facts are. Provost Holloway is a Lord of the Rings fan. If you go to Skulls Hall, you'll find all these little Hobbit doors around. He is the artist behind some of those. You don't know. Oh, that's pretty good.
It's true.
All right. Dr. Ellen Fisher, VPR Fisher currently serves as the UNM Vice President for Research. She's a professor in chemistry and chemical biology. She brings hands-on and applied perspectives from over 3 decades of work on interdisciplinary science teams. Her background is as a chemist, materials scientist, administrator, and research integrity officer. And this informs her research and practice with transdisciplinary scientific teams. Dr. Fisher's fun fact is that she's completed a half Ironman competition. Next to her is Dr. Mike Richards. Dr. Richards is the Executive Vice President at UNM's Health Sciences Center and CEO of the UNM Health System. He has extensive experience as both an administrator and physician and has dedicated more than 25 years of service to UNM. During his tenure, Richards has led several transformative initiatives, including a pivotal role in the creation and implementation of New Mexico's medical advisory team during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Richards once swam with sharks in the Caribbean. So he's not afraid of you guys.
I'm looking pretty lame here.
And then we've already met Hangami Raisi. Dr. Raisi is a professor and the Vice President of Research at UNM Health Sciences Center. She graduated from the UNM College of Pharmacy and joined the Department of Pediatrics in the School of Medicine in 2001. After completing a fellowship in pediatric pulmonary and pharmacotherapy at UNM. Dr. Raisi's home in Albuquerque has been used as a set for film production.
Was it the Lord of the Rings?
Maybe.
So we have implemented a few different strategies for collecting questions. We will have time for some questions from the room, but we did collect some questions in advance as people registered. And we're collecting some from the online forum as well. So I'm going to start with a couple that came in advance because I think they're questions that lots of people have. So the first question is, how is UNM responding to executive orders coming down from Washington that have the ability to impact higher education? And I'm going to start with you, Provost Holloway.
So thanks, Melissa, and thanks everyone for being here today, and thanks for all the work that you do, both in research and teaching and patient care and service to the state of New Mexico. So, I think one of the most important things we've done is we've all seen kind of this rapid set of changes, new policies, new priorities within the administration, new directives that have come out very quickly, making it a challenge sometimes to kind of figure out what should we respond to, what are the things that we need to do versus what are the things that are distractions. And so one of the things that we've done really developed over the last few weeks is kind of firstly a policy, or not a policy, but a philosophy about response. And that philosophy is we're going to respond to things that are specific and actionable and not respond to things that aren't specific and actionable. And there's a lot in the various orders, policies, and so on that have come out that are not specific or actionable. And so we don't always respond to everything because not everything needs to be responded to. And in fact, many things don't need to be responded to. The other thing we did was, and Ellen talked about this a little bit, we put together some small groups of people just to look at these orders and say, okay, where do they potentially impact us? Make some recommendations about what should we do in those various areas. Obviously here we'll talk a lot about the research one that Ellen's already said a little bit about. The research response team has been very active. And one of the reasons that team has been so active is it's in the research sphere that there has been the most specific and actionable set of orders and policy changes. So one of the things that's really driven all of that communication, all of that visibility is that's where actually a lot of stuff has been happening. There's some other areas that various executive orders and policies have impacted, and I'll just touch on them briefly so folks can hear about them. One is around the issues of immigration, enhanced enforcement around immigration. I want to start by saying there have been no immigration enforcement actions either on the UNM campuses or at the hospital. So I know there's been rumors that there haven't. What we have done is try to provide information to our community about what should you do if there's an enforcement action. We've created enhanced visibility of information for individuals who may be concerned about enforcement actions against them in particular. And so there's various training that's been going on across campus, Dream Zone, and so on. We're pointing we have a central website under the President's office. We're pointing there to various external entities as well who provide information to support those who may be concerned about immigration actions. Another area where there's been some impact is in employment. The actionable thing that happened there was the revocation of a 1965 executive order that created the idea of affirmative action in employment. There's kind of no question that a president can do that, revoke the executive order of a previous president. So we're looking at and have drafted policy changes related to affirmative action in our own hiring. NHR is doing putting together some information for units doing hiring so they know what are the changes from what we've done previously. The one important thing I'll say is that we have in the past had as a preferred qualification on job requirements, a statement that says that job candidates should be ready to support diversity as part of a preferred qualification. We're not backing away from that. The executive order doesn't require us to remove that kind of language. We're looking a little bit at tweaking the language. The point of that has nothing to do with characteristics of the identity characteristics of the candidate, that has to do with the statement that if you're going to come work at the University of New Mexico, you have to be ready to support the population of New Mexico and all of its cultural richness and diversity. And so that kind of statement is staying. I know that's been a question folks have been interested in. The set of executive orders that relate to inclusive excellence. And so we have a team that's been looking at those. There's very little there that is actually specific and actionable. So we're not asking people to change websites. We're not backing away from language. We still have a division of equity and inclusion. We're not making changes related to those. Folks are aware as well that the Department of Education put out what's called a Dear Colleague letter, asserting some things that universities should be careful about and so on. We've looked at that really carefully. There's very little we have to do, we believe, in response to that. Fundamentally, the language of these orders says you shouldn't do illegal DEI. Well, we can stop at illegal. We shouldn't do illegal, and we don't do things that are illegal. The things we do are defensible under the law, they're proper under the law, and so we continue to do them. Let's see, there's another section that's around patient care, and we don't see a need to make changes there, but I'll let Dr. Richards say a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you, Provost Holloway. And, I think that one of the most important things that you said is that the guiding principle here is that when we have something that is specific and actionable, we'll take action. And so all of the items that Provost just reviewed, they also have application in the clinical delivery system, but we also have a specific clinical group that's looking at those issues. And there are 4 things which have come up that we're monitoring that I frequently get asked about. One is gender affirming care, and as it stands now, we have not made any changes to our current delivery of care as a result of the executive order. Again, going back to, it's not specific or actionable, so there's been no change. Another item has been the Hyde Amendment. And New Mexico has laws which really very clearly direct that, and so there's been no change in our reproductive health services that we provide. The third one that we've been looking at most recently was just issued was about price transparency. We've been compliant with that for multiple years. And then the last one was on English language. We provide interpreter services to over 200 languages within our clinical delivery system. We see no change in that. We'll continue to monitor these, but as it stands right now, there's been lots of work evaluating these, but we really have not had to change the way that we've been delivering clinical care at this point. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next question is a 2-part question, and I'm going to direct this at the VPRs. The first part is, what is UNM doing to manage at-risk research funding? And the second part that's related is, how does UNM plan to continue to support researchers in the short term if funding is lost?
I'll start this one and say, this is one of the things that the rapid response team has done. We spent a lot of time looking at the grants, the current grants and contracts that we have across all of our campuses that we felt after the first sort of bolus of executive orders came out that we thought might be at risk for a variety of reasons, whether that was around DEIA language, environmental justice is another thing that we were looking at. And we came up with a rubric for evaluating our proposals and our grants to sort of do an internal assessment of those. And we've been collecting that data. We've done some internal assessing. But again, I'm going to go back to specific and actionable. We haven't had that many things that have been specific and actionable. When we have had those, for example, when we've had stop work orders, we have stopped work on those particular programs. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Racy in just a second, but I will say that I already mentioned that one of the things that we've already put in place is support for our student populations, not wanting them to be affected in the short term from any stop work orders or terminations of contracts, at least through the end of the semester, where we hope to be able to have a better picture of what might be lying ahead. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Racy to add on to that.
Thank you. So I just want to add that all of these, what you're hearing from Dr. Fisher is exactly what is happening at HSC too. And again, when we have our rapid response research team, we discuss all of these things so we can be aware of what is happening across campuses. We are closely monitoring all the notice of awards for the non-competing grants in addition to new grants. And again, if I hear something, main campus also hears about it and vice versa. This is our way to actually define exactly what is at risk. As you all have seen and have asked me many times, the definitions or the executive orders are very vague. So we really do not know exactly where the line is. And that is why we do not have a blanket approach for all the grants that may be at risk. That being said, and as Dr. Fisher mentioned, we do consider each grant one at a time. We had one, for example, yesterday that was affected by what happened with Columbia University and the funding. As we speak, we are in communication with the program officer to see actually we can be the lead investigator for that particular grant because there are 19 clinical sites as part of that grant that have been affected. Meanwhile, the PI found another investigator who was looking for a couple of coordinators in the community to help with the project. So his coordinators are going to switch to that one. So again, we are considering each case in a case-by-case grant. We look for solutions and we continue doing that. As Dr. Fisher mentioned, the stop work contracts and termination of the contracts, we have had a handful of them, less than 10 across both campuses. And again, we are monitoring things very closely.
Thank you both. If you are in the Zoom room and you have a question, please don't raise your hand. Write your question in the Q&A in the chat. That'll make sure that we can get it. We can't actually call on you with the way this is set up. And if you're in the room and you put a question down on a card and you want us to collect those cards, you just raise them. Somebody will come around. I don't see any cards. All right. With respect to long-term planning, what is UNM's financial situation and what lessons did we learn from the pandemic regarding unforeseen widespread negative impacts on our institution? I'm going to start with you, Dr. Richards.
Well, thank you for that question. So here's a couple of things about the long-term planning and COVID and some of the lessons learned. I think one of the items is that the reserves that we had in place were absolutely essential to being able to weather that storm. And our reserves are actually a matter of public record. We're a public institution. They get reported out to the regents. And we actually calculate those reserve rates using an item called our primary reserve rate. And we right now, as an institution, both for main campus and for health sciences, are right above where we would want to be for that minimum threshold of our overall reserves. And that number that we look for is between a 0.25 and a 0.5. And at health sciences, we're just above a 0.25 and main campus is a little bit above that. And so we've actually improved since COVID, but during COVID, we did drop down into about the 0.15 range, which meant that we were using those reserves. But probably a bigger lesson, I think, than we had reserves for COVID would be that I think we demonstrated that as an institution, we have incredible resiliency. We didn't just make it through the COVID. We were actually able to be a leader for the state and a leader for our community. And the things that we did here to adapt to the unique challenges in New Mexico actually became lessons learned for the entire United States. And so I think as we look at other things which precipitously change the agenda that might be in front of us today, like COVID did, I think we have the opportunity to rise and do the exact same thing again, to be able to show that we're a resilient organization, one that will be here in 4 years or 8 years or 20 years, and that we will adapt to whatever that changing agenda may be. And we will do that in a way that helps lead our community and our state. And I believe that we can also do that in a way that shows that we can lead this for our nation.
Would you like to add anything?
Sure, I'll jump in a little bit, although, you know, Dr. Richards has hit really the kind of key points there. One thing I would add is one of the challenges in working through a complex time, as this may be, and as COVID certainly was, is keeping an eye on the long term while you manage the short term. Because as Dr. Richards mentions, we will be here in 4 years, in 8 years, in 10 years, we'll be here in 100 years. And so we need to take care of where we are today and the challenges we have today, while also keeping an eye on the future and where we need to invest and grow. And that's actually one of the things we did during COVID. We actually invested in new things at the same time that we're managing a very difficult crisis. I'll add one other kind of piece of data. And so we present ourselves as financially in a good place, and we are. We could always be better in some metrics, but we are in a good place and really a little more healthy than we were during COVID. That's not just our opinion. So every couple of years, we have external rating agencies come in and look at our financial health. This is so that we can take out bonds and things like that. They rate us in a good place and stable. Many universities are rated as negative, meaning they're getting in a worse and worse financial position. They rate the University of New Mexico as stable. So it's not just our opinion, but external rating agencies look at us and see that we're in a stable financial position as well.
This is a question from the audience. Are there any active measures to start attracting serious funding from the private sector?
Yeah, we do have some efforts there, and I will say that it's kind of an interesting question. And last fall did a little bit of more deeper dive of an analysis of where our funding comes from for research. And it turns out that we are positioned where in FY24, approximately 80% of our funding came from federal sources, and about 15% comes from the state. And then the remainder comes from private foundations or industry, companies and so forth. And so this was something that we actually decided we were going to do something about 2 years ago. Now, a year and a half ago, we started an effort in my office to actually try to increase our engagement with industry partnerships in a variety of different ways, and also with corporate and foundation relations with the university's foundation. And so we have a development director that was hired a little over a year ago that has been working with the Grand Challenges programs and the Grand Challenges teams and the Category 3 centers to look at trying to increase our funding from foundations. That's one area of the private sector that I think we could do a lot better at. So that's one area. And then in terms of corporate engagement, we have increased our membership to UIDP, which is a national organization that looks at trying to build university industry partnerships. And so we've been actually engaging them in a variety of different projects and have plans to do some more of that. These are things that take a long time, so we're looking at how we might be able to excel those in the coming months because of the potential for a decrease in our federal research portfolio. So those are some things we've been doing on the main campus side. I will point out that the people that we've hired to work in this particular space are also working with folks on the health sciences campus. So this is also a cross-campus initiative. So I'll ask Dr. Racy can add more if she'd like.
Just a couple of more things. We are very much aligned with these activities. New Mexico Bioscience Authority is one of the efforts or investments of UNM, and we are definitely working on that private companies partnership. In addition, at HSC, we have had a lot of activities and collaboration with pharmaceutical companies, and that has also been a very productive relationship, in addition to networking and being able to request extra funds as a supplement to funded projects. So we will continue with those efforts, and our partners have been very open to those ideas. In addition, again, not necessarily private, but UNM Foundation, we are working very closely with UNM Foundation because they also feel like that New Mexicans overall would like to contribute during these times and support us with our research endeavor.
Thank you. Just a couple of specific questions here. Why are multiple capital improvement projects moving forward despite the possibility of losing research funding?
So I'll jump in on that, and Dr. Richards can add to it if you'd like. You know, part of it really goes back to what we were just talking about. We're going to be here in 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. And so it would be a mistake for the university to lose sight of its future while dealing with the challenges of the present. And when you look at capital projects, these are long-range projects. They take years to go from conception to completion. So that's an important piece of thinking about this kind of question. The other piece that's important is that dollars really aren't fungible. And so dollars that the state allocates, for example, for capital for buildings can only be spent on buildings. They can't be spent to fill in gaps for other needs. And the same with bonds that we may take out and so on. And so the funding that comes for certain kinds of projects can only be used for those kinds of projects, and really can't be used even in an emergency or in a contingency to fund other kinds of activities. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to add anything.
Well, Provost Holloway, I think that is the most important point, which is that these funding streams are not interchangeable. And I think that the idea that we are planning for our future, and I think one of the most important things that we can do to support the research mission is making sure that while we work through the challenges that we have in our immediate future, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we have to have the infrastructure to support our science and innovation, you know, for the generations to come. And so I think that we demonstrated that during COVID, actually, when we kept our big capital projects underway. And I have to say that had we not done that, you know, we would then find ourselves in a place where we wouldn't be able to continue the kind of growth that we hope to experience, you know, across both our education and our research missions.
So the rapid response teams have been collecting data from individual researchers. What is leadership planning to do with those data on current research projects? And what support is there for finding and applying for non-federal funding opportunities?
So yes, we want to make sure that if a grant gets terminated before we have actually finished the work, we can collect the data can be collected and can be used in order to apply for the future grants, to respond to new RFPs, RFAs, and NOFOs, because we know they're going to come out and we know we may have to pivot. So we want to make sure that pilot data is available to take the research to the next level. So again, we are watching this very closely and we consider this in a case-by-case situation. In addition to that, we are sharing weekly emails with regard to opportunities for funding, and we are trying to identify, you know, all kind of opportunities with foundations, private companies, to make sure that the research will continue.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things to that we are, again, collecting some data to be able to help individual, as we said earlier, individual researchers with potentially reframing or pivoting to other kinds of opportunities. And we may have, we've been having a discussion, we have a new We Are One faculty success program to add to our portfolio. And we have a great acronym for it, as usual, because my office likes to come up with good acronyms. But that one in particular is interested in focusing on resubmission of proposals that have either been denied or have been terminated. And again, thinking about how do we reframe or pivot to different potential opportunities, either because new ones have opened within the federal government or to go after private funding. And so I'm going to do a shout out to our Faculty Research Development Office. We have a lot of amazing people there that can help researchers with those kinds of things. And we're going to put in place some other types of training and support programs over the coming months.
You forgot the acronym.
Okay, I'm going to tell the acronym. They wanted it to be GROW, which stands for Grant Resubmission for Outstanding Wins. And I said we should add an L to the end so that it becomes GROWL. And the L stands for, so again, Grant Resubmission for Outstanding Wins from Losses. So, so we may have a program soon that's called GROWL. So.
Stay tuned. I'm gonna take one from the audience in the back. You'll have to shout. We don't have any mics to pass around.
I just ask it. Yeah, I was wondering if UNM is part of any national or regional associations with other universities that are helping fight against some of these, like what I see as illegal executive orders. And yeah, so if they're banding together. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question, and I'll start on that. So the question, just to repeat it so that folks online can hear it, is UNM part of any national organizations that are part of the various legal challenges that are going on with respect to some of the executive orders and other federal actions? The answer is yes. And the three of the organizations that are very much taking the lead on some of these are the AAU, the American Association of Universities, which we're not a member of, the APLU, Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, which we are a member of, ACE, the American Council on Education, which we're a member of. Those three organizations in DC have been really central, both in legal actions, but also in the work in Washington to affect either the way that these orders are rolled out or to change some of the things about what they say. And so it's not always legal action. Sometimes it is actually working with Congress, working with the executive branch to make changes. And all of that work is going on. There are some other organizations that we're also part of that have been driving some of these legal actions. And in many cases, that's the right way to drive these kinds of legal actions as opposed to individual institutions filing lawsuits and so on. Both because the national organizations have the capacity to bring together the issues from multiple universities rather than the issues of one university, and also to really formulate the legal issues in a crystal and concrete way in order to have the right kind of legal actions. It's easy to go to court with something, in fact, that's the wrong legal argument. And so these organizations have been really pivotal in bringing forward the legal arguments that have led to the temporary restraining orders, injunctions, and so on. And so, yes, we're absolutely part of those organizations. I'll also mention that several states' attorneys generals have been engaged in legal actions, including the Attorney General of the state of New Mexico. And we provided a declaration, for example, for the legal action that our Attorney General joined regarding the NIH indirect cost rate. And so those kinds of actions are going on as well.
We have a flurry of questions in the Zoom.
I just want to add, because we have a lot of our research administrators are here in the audience, that we also have a lot of activity with COGR, which is the Council on Government Relations, and with NORDP, which is the National Organization for Research Development Professionals. And there's one other that all of the sponsored projects people do, NCURA, that's the other one. And so I just want to point out that our research administrators are also keeping their ears to the ground with what's happening with those organizations, which tend to work more behind the scenes on policy and that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of people with connections to what's going on in DC and in other institutions across the nation.
So a bunch of questions coming in about job security and folks wanting to understand the prospects for soft money positions, research faculty, research staff, postdocs, and the like. Anything you can help us with?
I can start here.
Yes.
So I'll start, and the question's really around what are the possible consequences related to folks' positions? And you know, we have to start with that's really hard to predict right now. One of the challenges we're going through is that there's tremendous amounts of uncertainty. You know, I think the way this looked 2-3 weeks ago was very chaotic and quite frankly, quite scary. Things today look a little less chaotic and less scary, but there's no question there's going to be impacts on the kind of research that would get done through federal funding, through the amount of federal funding that will be available around research. Estimating the magnitude of that at this point is really difficult, but there's no question there's going to be impacts. We're very mindful that, you know, if as a consequence of this, we lose people, we're really losing is talent. We're losing the intellectual gifts that those people have. And remember, we're going to be here in 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. And so we're very mindful about trying not to lose people. I don't think any of us can sit here today and say that absolutely that won't happen, but we're very mindful about that point. We've got really smart, creative research faculty, regular faculty, student researchers, technical staff, research administrators, the accounting folks. These are the folks who make all of it happen. And they're all important and necessary, and they all bring huge talents and gifts to the institution and to the work of the institution for New Mexico. So we're trying to be very mindful about that. That is why, for example, why Dr. Richards and I have kind of our immediate step was put something in place to make sure that students who might lose their support suddenly in February, in the middle of a term, had some kind of a backup, because at the time we did that, that's who we were seeing being affected. They were being affected right then. We had students being dropped off grants. Research scientists were able to move to other grants. There were other adjustments we could make, but we needed to do something for students right away. And so we've done that. And we're watching and paying attention to what other needs might arise. And again, I don't want that to come across as, oh, it's all good. It's not all good. But we're trying to be really mindful about not losing talent and equally important, not creating that disruption in people's lives that is not good for them as humans. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Yeah, so Provost Holloway, just a couple of things. So part of the framework on how we're thinking about looking at the risk in terms of the finances associated with this, or working with Dr. Racy, is like thinking about this in 4 big categories right now. So we do know that notices of awards could be delayed, but they really haven't been up to this point, but kind of looking out at what we think might be happening with the structure of the funding agencies and starting to anticipate what would that timing delays look like and how would we prepare for them. We also know that we've been given clear signals that some things may not continue, or some grants that we had been, anticipating may not occur. And then, so how do we do contingency planning for them and to think about those transitions? There's been already some discussion here today about, a bit of the uncertainty around the indirect rates, but also really starting to understand what that might look like and how we're using our indirect rates to support the institution and our research. And then lastly, something that I think is something we should look at maybe as not just a challenge, but a new opportunity, which is that there is a new set of priorities, and how do we line ourselves up with this new strategy and find opportunity in this, not just threat? Because there are some things I think that we're clearly going to have to replace doing, but I think we might be well positioned to be able to take advantage of some of the new opportunities that might come along.
Thank you. Do we have any from the live audience? Any questions? Okay, there's a question in the Zoom chat. A lot of the discussion publicly has been about impacts to NIH. Are you hearing anything, or do you forecast anything about other types of federal funding?
Ellen, do not answer that question, because you know what's going to happen Friday.
I know, whatever we say, something's gonna happen on Friday. With the research rapid response team, we joke a lot about that. We do find some dark humor as we go along here. And Fridays are not good days anymore. We used to say TGIF, now we're like, no, maybe we don't need a Friday this week. Okay, what I was gonna say is that, just within the last week, I would say that I've had multiple conversations with, and Hang Mei's been there for most of these, with, our government relations, people, as well as, Leslie Gilbert, who is, is a member of the, Van Syke and Associates. It's a lobbyist firm in DC, and they've been working with, UNM for, over a decade, and they do a lot of the sort of interpretation of what goes on in DC, and makes it understandable for those of us who don't pay that much attention most of the time. Anyway, what I would say is that what you've heard here is what we're hearing with respect to the other funding agencies, that DOD, DOE, so Department of Defense, Department of Energy, they look to be lining up to give more funding to those agencies over the term of this administration. And so those are places where we're looking for and trying to read the tea leaves on what the new opportunities might be in those spaces in particular. National Science Foundation seems to be holding steady for the most part, and we haven't seen a lot of activity out of NSF with respect to termination of grants. There have been a couple I know of nationwide that were rather they were very much focused in particular areas that are not a priority for the current administration. And so, but beyond that, we're still in the 90-day period of review. And what we're hearing on the ground is that there's a lot of work being done by our program officers. And I heard through one of the channels that I have that there's a movement that this Friday, that rather than making it a bad Friday, that we have a movement for people to reach out to any program officers you know and to thank them for the work that they're doing, because those people are not our enemies. They are working really hard to be able to get money out the door to our researchers, and they've been under quite a bit of strain and stress. So I just wanted to put a plug in there for program officers. But what I'm hearing and what we're seeing is that program officers are really trying to work with researchers to rescope the current grants, to allow the funding to be redistributed but not to be taken away, to not terminate grants, et cetera. And so at least in the short term, meaning the rest of this fiscal year, maybe into the next fiscal year, it's looking pretty steady with some of the other ones. NASA also is one that I think we're going to see an increase in the funding available at NASA. EPA is going to be one that probably is going to take a big hit with respect to their ability to provide funding. And that's, again, just reading the tea leaves with alignment with the new administration's stated priorities.
Please.
Do you have a feel for the Department of Transportation funding?
No. No, again, I think that this is a place where under the previous administration, there was a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, and sort of the Inflation Reduction Act had a lot of emphasis on that. Parts of that are being dismantled. And so it's not clear exactly where DOT is going to end up with respect to that. And so not to be too glib about it, but that's one that's, it could end up being something that becomes a priority. And it could be something that gets swept away because it's seen as being part of the previous administration. So.
I can add kind of one bit of 40,000 foot nuance here. One of the challenges for us certainly, but for the departments that fund us as well, is the uncertainty and the constant churn. And so there are things that agencies announced or wanted us to do last week, which are invalidated or should be changed based on a court ruling on Monday. And so the program officers who are doing their best to do what they're instructed to do were told to do something last week, and then this week they really should be doing something different. And they work in large organizations just like we do. Communication is difficult in those organizations. So there's uncertainty on the federal side as well around different kinds of funding pieces. And so we're all working in this moment of rapid change, including, and I very much agree with Ellen, our program managers are our friends. They're trying to support us, but they're also working in a very complex and confused situation. And you know, there are departments like the Department of Education, which we rely on significantly for Title III, Title V funding for our branch campuses. It's really unclear where that will be, and they're undergoing a huge reduction in force. And so whether they're planning to fund things there or not, they may or may not have the workforce to actually carry it forward. So again, just a lot of confusion and uncertainty.
Other questions from the live audience? I'm gonna paraphrase a few questions that I've seen in the chat that are about the prospects, if FNA rates are in fact cut, for maintaining a lot of our research support and internal funding programs, including the RAC program, and some related questions about whether there are any plans to expand that, including on HSC outside of school medicine.
So maybe I'll make a comment about that. So because the indirect rates which have been discussed so far have really been for NIH. And so that's a lot of that happens at the Health Sciences Center. And so what we know right now is we don't know what that rate will be. I think that it is reasonable to say that we've been told that whatever the current rates are, that they're probably going to be less in the future. But, you know, we've worked very closely with our congressional delegation in DC, and they're able to give us some insight into the idea that rate reductions are likely to happen. But I remain optimistic that while those rate reductions are going to occur, that they're not going to be a significant change for us. They will be for some institutions, but I believe that at least right now, the numbers that folks are talking about, you know, might mean, you know, a single digit like rate reductions for the NIH indirects. But, you know, I have to just say that that is with complete speculation at this point, you know, and so we're, again, having to just wait and see how this plays out. And this again gets back to we need to do our contingency planning. We know that we need to take a look at how we're using these resources so that we'll be well prepared to use the resources in the best way in the future. But our guiding principle right now is when we get something that's specific and actionable, then we'll take action, but we'll continue to do the planning. But right now it looks like those rate reductions, the conversations that we're hearing are not as severe as they maybe had originally been communicated.
And let me add one piece to this conversation, and that sometimes it sounds very passive. We're waiting to see what happens, but in fact, the way that those indirect cost rate conversations are being carried on in DC is with those national organizations we talked about earlier that we are part of and that we have input into. So it's not really we're just sitting around waiting and seeing what's happening. Our president is engaged with the leadership of those national organizations to make sure that we're well informed and that those conversations take our concerns into account.
And I want to say that part of the reason that we talk about the NIH rate is that NIH basically, how NIH goes, the rest of the funding agencies go. So if NIH were to have a reduced rate, that is likely to be followed by other agencies across the federal funding landscape. And so while NIH is leading in terms of that's been the news around the NIH, we are want to acknowledge that if that were to happen, that we would likely see it with the other agencies. So it's also an impact to the entire enterprise in terms of that. So this is one area that we're following very closely on all fronts.
And one thing I can add, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Fisher is doing the same thing. We are looking at the costs and what is being covered by overheads. And we are doing that with all the colleges and schools. And we are looking at that as part of our research infrastructure costs to see if there is actually room to decrease the cost or leverage resources. So we are preparing for the worst case scenario, but what we are hearing repeatedly is that 15% cap is not going to be it. So we remain very optimistic.
Been reading a lot about universities that have
put into place hiring freezes and untouching positions for graduate students and MCA would have to think we're in that area.
So I'll take a crack at that and then others can jump in. This kind of comes back to our philosophy of specific and actionable. And so we're trying not to respond to things really based on uncertainty. What we don't want to do is amplify the churn that's created by this sort of sequence of government actions and policy changes and so on. So we're trying to be really measured about making decisions now that have huge long-term impacts simply in response to uncertainty itself. And so we haven't done the kind of, we haven't done hiring freezes that some institutions have done, for example. The Dean of Graduate Studies put out a memo on graduate student recruiting and the basic message is recruit as you always do, but remember, as you always do includes the understanding if you're bringing in a PhD student and promising them support, you need to have confidence that you can actually have that support. That's always been true. That's not something new. So it is something that individual units need to be very mindful about. Are we confident that we can in fact have the support for these students when we bring them in? So we're purposefully not going into that kind of freezing of hiring and banning travel and those kinds of things at this point, because we don't see the need for it yet. It's not an action that's in response to something specific. I want to add one other thing on travel because folks have asked this question at various points. Folks have asked questions like, should I travel to a conference on diversity issues? Yes. If that's your research, if that's what you need to go and talk about and share with your colleagues, you absolutely should do that. There's no reason not to do that.
I'm going to ask one last question that came from the Zoom room, which is, can you tell us a little bit more about the conversations you've had with the state legislature about what the impacts are for UNM?
Mike.
Yeah. So I've, on behalf of the university, I've been able to have several conversations at the state level, including representing a document that the Executive Vice President for Administration and Finance put together, which looked at all of the categories of federal funding that we have at the university that could potentially be at risk. I was able to actually testify on that about a week or so ago at the Senate Finance Committee, where they had a special Saturday hearing to talk specifically about potential implications to the state of New Mexico for federal cuts. And so I think that demonstrates that the state is paying very close attention to this. We've also had the opportunity to have multiple conversations with members of our state legislature and members of the executive branch, including our secretaries, around the implications of the federal funding, the executive orders, and all the things that we've talked about here today. You may have read in the paper or seen in one of the presentations that the governor has even contemplated that after the federal budget is issued, if necessary, she said that she would be willing to call a special session of our legislature to talk about how the state could support ongoing programs if we were to be significantly impacted. You know, I think that shows that it's not just here that's paying attention to this. It's this is being paid attention to very closely at the state level. And as Provost Holloway had mentioned, our state attorney general has been a very strong advocate for us in regard to many of these issues.
Wonderful. We've reached the end of our allotted time for questions, and we thought it was really important to build in time for community. So I'm going to ask the panel if there's anything they'd like to say as far as concluding remarks, and then we can adjourn to reception.
Well, I could talk about Lord of the Rings, apparently. You know, just really quickly in closing, I think hopefully the takeaway message for folks is, look, you know, we know that there are challenges facing us. We want to be really careful not to overreact to the noise. We really want to focus on here are things we really should do because we must do them. And we don't want to respond to, we don't want to change who we are. We don't want to change what we do without a really clear, compelling reason. And in many cases, while it may feel like, oh, we need to make this change, other universities are making this change, in many cases, there really isn't a clear, compelling reason, not at this point. And so I'd encourage all of us to be really careful to continue with our mission, continue with the work that we do. This state is like no other state. The cultural richness, the diversity of our people, this is core to who we are. We can't give up on who we are, regardless of whatever challenges or noise may be generated in our nation's capital. So we need to focus on our mission and what we do, and our soul as a institution that is diverse and cares about diversity, and continue that work.
We'll just go down the line. We're gonna go down the line. I'm gonna tell them what we're doing. I've already cried in front of y'all, so I'm not gonna do that again. But I do want to give, I guess the one thing I'm gonna say is that I'm gonna give out a plug for we are trying to communicate with you as best we can. I would put in a plug for reading our communications. Go to the website. We're trying to update that regularly. If you have questions, please ask us. If you get a notification from your funding agency, please let us know. We're here to help you. We want to help you. Our sponsored projects offices are also really trying to help individual researchers. So please let us know, and we will do our best to help you however we can.
Well, I'd like to just say thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do for the university and for our learners and for our state. And I hope that one of the things that you've heard today is that we are in fact paying very much attention to these issues. You may have heard me say that I'm optimistic about some things, but let me also just acknowledge that this is a very stressful time right now. And I appreciate that this uncertainty is very hard on you, it's hard on our learners. But I am certain of one thing, and Provost Holloway said this, which is that we've been here since 1889. We will be here in 4 years, in 8 years, and in 20 years. And we have survived and thrived in some cases when agendas have changed and policies have changed and priorities have changed. I don't mean in any way to diminish the difficulty of some of the decisions that we might have to make or the transitions that we may have to undergo, but just know I am absolutely certain that that the work that you do matters. It matters to our learners, it matters to our state, and that we will in fact be here in 4 years and in 10 years. And so please don't ever lose sight of that long range commitment that we have to our state and our community.
How did I end up being the last? First, I just want to make sure everybody knows that my house was not in Breaking Bad. Being a pharmacist and all, I thought you might think that way, so I just want to make that clear. Second, I want to thank you all for emails, text messages, communicating with us what you learn from your program officers, from your colleagues, and sharing with us. Because the minute I hear something from you, I am sharing with this group, and that is how we can get more clarification by knowing the actual cases, actual grants being terminated, or NSF asking for a grant to reallocate funds with focusing on this and that. These are the things that we learn from you and your colleagues and your program officers. So please keep us in the loop and communicate with us. We are here for you, and together we're gonna make this.
So we're sitting here, Greg and I are watching all the hearts on the screen and lots of sentiments thanking you for your leadership and thanking you just for being willing to sit here and do this for us today. Thank you all for coming and for caring so much about research, about your students, about your fellow UNM Lobos, and please enjoy your afternoon.